Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. It's not often this show looks at those self-contained stories set in different realities with alternate paths of our favorite heroes and villains. I wasn't trying to lead into anything, I'm just stating a fact. Although when you consider how often characters from different companies meeting each other tends to have no impact on their ongoings, my many years of the crossover could fit that alternative universe bill. Even so, I kind of thought of making a segment out of Elseworlds or the like. Even had a special name in mind, but never really got around to making any cards or graphics, and I tend to stick to the main canon stories of whichever publisher I'm talking about anyway. Producing a rarely watched comic review show and being turned into a cartoon can be surprisingly time-consuming. That and the crippling depression and being preoccupied by stuff I should probably focus less on. I wouldn't call myself easily distracted, but fact is, hey, what's that? Squirrel! I've mentioned being more of a DC guy historically, so of course I have a bunch of Elseworlds comics, but I'm less familiar with Marvel's equivalent What If as a result. It's not just a matter of whether or not I own it, but I couldn't tell you if any one issue is more famous or resonant than any other. One could argue that because they're typically one-off stories that hardly if ever get revisited, much less have any impact on the overall universe, they're less likely to be as remembered as well as, say, Crisis or Infinity War. Whatever the case may be, today I'm taking issue with What If number 100 of its second volume, one of only 3 issues of the title I've actually ever bought. Let's see if this special double-sized anniversary comic makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads. The cover has a plain white background, featuring Sinister showing that he does indeed lift bro by hoisting the unconscious Gambit and Rogue by their trademark coats.
Not 5 minutes ago, you said you weren't tired and didn't need to go to bed. But look at you now!
The greatest secret of the Marvel Universe, revealed! If it's that John Romita Jr. uses sour cream in his mashed potato recipe, we already know. However, before getting to the main story, I thought I'd get the backup story out of the way first. There's no place like that place where you sleep and keep all your stuff.
And to make a long story short,
Too late!
Written by Robert Piotrowski, with art by Rurik Tyler, Harry Candelario, and Glynis Oliver, we see the not-yet Fantastic Four on their fateful space mission in vivid black and white as things start getting shaky. The ambitious dream of scientist Reed Richards has turned into a nightmare. Maybe flying a spaceship into a radiation storm was not the best way to determine how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop. Turbulence sends Sue Storm into a wall and knocks her out. She wakes up, colorized, her ship wrecked, and relieved of her shoes, as well as being met by the Micronuts, Reran and Chug, who tell her she's in the wonderful land of fuzz.
Don't expect a lot of puppies and cuddly bunnies. This is where people dump all their dryer lint.
Her friends are nowhere to be found, save her little robot buddy Herbie, who flies over to greet her. The ground is then lifted up by this guy, who looks like a slightly less outrageously dressed Paul Schaefer, calling himself UR2 the Looker. Sue is more of a looker if you ask me, but hey, she's the only woman in the story so far, ha-cha-cha-cha-cha. He offers her a slice of cake, with coconut sprinkles, but they get interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Vavavoom, the totally evil. He's angry at Sue because her ship crushed his cousin, Galactic Cuss, and wants his invisible sneakers. But they've already found themselves on Sue's feet, so UR2 tells him to buzz off.
But only because I choose to.
Before leaving on his flying butter churn, I think, he threatens to get the sneakers stealer.
Maybe not in this story, because the artist forgot to draw page 6, where I reappear and am ultimately defeated.
Baldy sends Susan on her way, along the yellowish road to see Captain No More, who will help her find her friends, and she should really get moving because this is only a 10-page story. I've reviewed more serious comics that could have really benefited from this level of self-awareness. Several hours later, while internally swearing to kill Reed for getting her into this mess, she gets Herbie unstuck from a puddle. That's actually a guy called Wreck. Kinda weird that she doesn't even balk at how much he resembles her fiancé, whom she just threatened, but moving on. She offers to take him along to see No More, who could perhaps help him with his pliability, and he says that'd be shwoo, whatever that means. So he hangs on her like a backpack as they go their merry way, until coming across an unusually hot wheat field. They're looking at something they can't decipher the meaning of, and nor can the reader since it's off-panel, but Sue figures there must have been a fire, at which point flames shoot nearby. Lousy, pesky dragons. If this affects the steady supply of garlic Triscuits, all will know my wrath! No, it's a guy named Jolly, who says he tried to warn them to stay away, but they wouldn't listen, despite no indication anywhere that's the case. Maybe something was left out accidentally? Was it whatever Rek and Sue were looking at? Anyway, he tries to explain that he bursts into flame whenever anyone says that word for what you roast marshmallows over, at which point Rek says fire and he combusts. Now, with another member of the party, they arrive at a swamp that makes Rek rather nervous, about mole men and mutants and Skrulls, oh my.
Is that racist?
Yes.
A little bit.
No.
They're surprised by a large man made out of bricks landing nearby. Despite his appearance, he assures he won't eat them, and he's not a monster. It's just the swamp is killing his pores, and his lack of moisturizer has turned him into some kinda thang.
Growing up, other kids would always tell me, it ain't no thing. Little did I realize that one day, I would be that thing.
Sue thinks he'd be a great addition to their group, and No More could probably help him as well. Since he's been meaning to get away for a while, Thang agrees. So much later that narration claims we wouldn't believe it, they arrive at the end of the Yellowish Road, to a lake with a giant rubber ducky that Jolly says must be No More's fortress. Let's not jump to conclusions, it could just as easily be the sovereignty of Ernie from Sesame Street. Thang has an idea about how to get across, grabbing some logs, which Rek laughs at, asking if he's gonna build a raft. He does, and the living puddle is made the sail. It's a little rickety, but it's working, though an argument between Rek and Jolly makes him say fire by mistake, and the resultant burst of flames propels them toward the ducky faster than they can control. They end up crashing into No More's throne room right as he's being told that nothing could get past his new security system. Despite being modeled after Submariner, he's actually chill about all this, more interested in Sue's invisible sneakers, however he can see that she has them. Maybe his special Atlantean vision can detect how their outline suddenly changed from red to gray. Miss Storm, being sick of all this, removes the shoes and I guess loses them in between panels, but agrees to fork them over to No More if he promises to give her and her companions what they want. He agrees and asks for their requests.
Oh, no more spontaneous combustion at the mention of that thing you get when you rub two sticks together.
Splinters? Thang asks for a year's supply of moisturizer, and Rek, with a horrifying grin, asks for a duck dinner by mistake. Before he can correct himself, No More snaps his fingers, and they've been given what they wanted, to varying results. Sue just wants to go home, which she can do by pulling the plug on this whole gag, with a chain suddenly appearing before her. No More realizes he doesn't know where the invisible sneakers are, as Susan wakes up back in monochrome, to the ship totaled, and Reed asking if she's alright. She does that whole I had this dream and you were there shtick when Johnny approaches.
Never mind that, sis. You're not going to believe what happened to us out there in space. Enough about your dreams brought on by traumatic head injury. Johnny want attention now.
He shows off what the radiation did for him as he conjures a flame. The story ends with her loved ones confused as she cries out, "No!"
The script called for me to say yes, but I gave it a little twist.
This was a fun little parody of Wizard of Oz. It has a very goofball comedic vibe to it, so you could forgive some inconsistencies, like why the shoes changed size, maybe a nod to Sue altering the size of her force fields, though some stuff seemed unexplained, like Jolly seeming frustrated for no clear reason when Thang joined their quest, or what Rek and Sue were looking at in that wheat field. Some of the dialogue, and a panel or two, were oddly arranged, which might lead one to read in the wrong order, get a little confused, and possibly taken out of the story. Still, even if some of the jokes had obvious punchlines, it was an enjoyably silly send-up for an anniversary title featuring Marvel's first family. And if those dream friends were subconsciously based on her real-life friends, it raises questions about how Sue sees them, with Reed being a lunkhead that can barely keep himself together, and Namor being more or less the same, just a lot nicer. Though finding out how mildly prophetic that dream was is the least of Sue's worries, because look at how she hits the wall. Her lower half is twisted around. It's a wonder she's still alive, and she'll be lucky if she can be mildly ambulatory again. Her spine is clearly damaged here. There are several faux covers afterwards that are good for a laugh, like Xavier's sales executives with Bishop and his sister Shard, Wolver Wimp losing to Maggie Nito, as well as a reference to how sometimes he didn't have a nose after his adamantium was removed. Then finally, what we'd have gotten if Peter Parker's radioactive bite came not from a spider, but a sheep. Sheep Boy. With that out of the way, let's get to the main story, written by Ivan Velez Jr., with Klaus Janson helping on the plot as he works on art with Glynis Oliver. We begin with a splash page of Gambit and 2 handfuls of fanned-out playing cards, next to what is presumably a mirror with his reflection. Though the angle doesn't seem to be quite an exact match, so maybe it's just a portrait of him that's coincidentally also of him holding cards. As a comic book reviewer, it's my job to turn innocuous details into one of those spot the differences visual games your friends are always reposting on Facebook. His narration boxes are also shaped like cards, which is a nice touch. Remy is introducing himself, how he was one of the X-Men, fighting for good, but that kinda went against his nature, and eventually the thief stole from the team. And I'm guessing not just from the communal fridge. He'd given his life to the cards, that gave him both chance and structure, which took away responsibility somehow. Weird, I'd figure more structure would enable responsibility, or at least vice versa, but getting philosophical would just make this review longer. He tosses the cards into the air, saying they're not enough anymore, and only wants one to rule his life now. The Queen of Hearts, which happens to be all the cards he had. So did he find a vendor that sold entire decks of just a single kind of card? Or did he spend years picking the Queen of Hearts out of each regular deck he was using and save them for a dramatic display like this, with no one else around to see? Hearts, commitment to cards. There's a Yu-Gi-Oh joke in there somewhere, but I don't care enough about the franchise to find it. And wouldn't Remy deciding he knows what to do because of this be more significant and dramatic if the Queen of Hearts was the only one of its kind and landed in a significant way? This seems like he just wanted to make a mess while pretending to be meaningful to himself. So like James Tiny in the Fourth. Also, weird how they all landed face up.
Not scientifically possible!
He startles Rogue awake in her room, perched at the foot of her bed, saying he came back to the X-Mansion because of his love for her, but the Southern Belle is not convinced, lunging at him and saying he doesn't love anyone but himself, before asking how Remy could steal files from Cerebro, Xavier's supercomputer, and give them to outsiders.
Look, Cher, Gambit makes some wagers at the horse track, and things not go like Gambit thought.
She lifts him against the wall, not accepting any excuse of him having his reasons, and threatens to snap his neck, until he shows her a ring.
Genuine official prop used in them Lord of the Rings movie, Petit. Well, with some computer files, don't you think?
Why does the inside say Sonic the Hedgehog 3 next to the McDonald's logo?
Oh, son of a bitch!
He proposes to her as she lets him go, saying she's not responsible for the world and deserves to be happy, pleading to run away with him. Rogue turns away, slouched on her mattress, saying he's cruel to do this when she can't touch him without absorbing everything he is.
You want to end up in the hospital?
Maybe it's worth it, no?
She doesn't want to risk erasing him and tells him to leave. So he does, heading to the secret lair of Mr. Sinister, who not only anticipated his proposal, but even told the Cajun he'd be shot down like a bad fighter jet pilot.
Why would she want you when she's already wed to her own misery?
To be fair, the vows they exchanged were really heartfelt, and that reception had amazing catering. Gambit snipes back that if Sinister knew as much as he claims, he wouldn't need those Cerebro files, but Chalkface claims to be a connoisseur of information, so I guess the genetic experimentation and eugenic stuff is all just a hobby. As great as the info the thief has provided has been, Essex has one more job, but LeBeau isn't having it, just wanting his pay, which turns out to be providing one element for the cure of the legacy virus, a plague that was devastating the mutant community, which Sinister promises to download into both the S.H.I.E.L.D. mainframe and Cerebro. One element seems to be a bit of a ripoff, but after Cinzy pinky swears to make it happen, Gambit begins to leave. Until...
I have the cure for Rogue.
For the last time, it's not a disease. Her hair just naturally has that white patch. She makes it work, so you shut your filthy mouth. In the secret room in his secret lair, a little redundant, but okay, Sinister has items that appear to be rather unremarkable tithe boxes, something churches might offer for people to drop in donations. But after collecting these over the past 3 decades, from India to the Antarctic, the villain is certain they'll bring him untold knowledge. He knows where the final tithe box is and wants the finest thief in the world to get it for him.
But since he's booked through next year, I'm hiring you instead. Ha 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 ha! We have fun.
In exchange, he'll give the Cajun the chance to be with Rogue. Following Sinister's directions, Remy drops down into the sewer, explodes open a gate, walks through the Morlock tunnels.
Go past the deepest reaches of human man. Go past the Forgotten City. Make a left at the Graveyard of Sorrows. But if you get to an abandoned radio shack, you've gone too far.
It's there Gambit reaches a pit that he has to drop into. How far he'll fall, Sinister doesn't know or care. But, shouldn't he? After all, wouldn't that knowledge be important? And if his hired help dies in the fall, shouldn't he care that he won't get that last box? At the bottom, Gambit finds a statue of the Forgotten One, being worshipped by some people that give Remy pause, and wonders if maybe he's in over his head this time. He considers calling it quits, but thinks of Rogue, the life they could have, and charges forward. He's spotted, and the strange people start advancing on him, as Gambit throws a card or two and evades the overwhelming numbers.
Get him! Destroy him! Should have called ahead. So rude to show up unannounced.
Despite not wanting to hurt them, he tosses explosive cards at the statue, toppling it over, much to the worshippers' dismay. But hey, now the box is free for the taking, so he grabs it and makes an exit, away from the inhuman wailing and running right into Rogue, who followed him long enough to discover he's been working with Sinister in very unhero-like fashion.
He's the devil! The devil has what I want. Weird as it sounds, Shell, Gambit always want to own Spider-Man's marriage.
I guess she felt this was too personal to contact any of her other teammates, hence her flying in solo.
The studio couldn't afford another X-Man.
She demands the box and its contents, seems to very briefly fall for that Cajun charm, but she turns away, telling him to knock it off and allow her to take the item to the professor. Remy's answer is to explode off a boulder to keep Rogue busy while he takes off. She's a hero, after all, so she won't let it risk the lives of those people below. This scene makes me hope that cure does work, that Rogue will be able to control her powers and avoid harming others through physical contact, then find a much better boyfriend, since Gambit's a real jackwagon for doing this, in the name of love or not. Making it topside, the Cajun laments betraying her yet again, and after all the trouble in getting this ordinary-looking container, he's tempted to take a quick peek, but stops himself, remembering how clear Sinister was in not doing that. And if the inner monologue wasn't enough, the villain himself is there, to remind him he'll lose all he holds dear should he look inside the box.
That's right. Your entire collection of rare Beanie Babies gone!
Gambit throws the tithe box at his feet. Wow, that's just poor professionalism right there. But Essex doesn't seem to mind, as he hands over a vial with the cure.
You have earned your fee and more. I'm going to recommend you to all my supervillain buddies. Doc Ock, Kingpin, all the goblins, just everyone in my contact list.
Once Rogue drinks it, she'll have full mastery of her powers, not absorbing anyone's abilities or memories unless she so chooses. As Remy focuses on this elixir, his contractor pulls a Batman and disappears. Just as he's wondering if this was worth it all, Rogue busts out from beneath the ground, causing him to lose the vial, flung into the air. She catches it, asking what the deal is, and shuts down his flirtations, asking why the guy she thought cared for him has been tormenting her like this, in a very odd expression. It doesn't quite convey the agonized feelings of her dialogue, and it's kind of a weird angle. He tells her what the liquid will allegedly do, but she thinks he's so blinded by love that he's buying into a lie. Later, in a hotel room, he's explained his treacherous missions were to obtain a key for curing the legacy virus, and what's a few small betrayals to something that would be so beneficial. He was going to leave it at that, but then Cinzy wanted
One more thing.
for this supposed cure. Rogue says he was a fool to believe all that, how the box could potentially end the world, but Gambit only cares about their relationship. They can keep loving each other from a distance or take this chance. Feeling there's no reasoning with the lovesick Cajun, Rogue figures there's only one way to prove Sinister cannot be trusted. Go to the mansion with the concoction and have it analyzed by Beast, Xavier, and all that super science equipment they have. Or, failing that, call Reed Richards or even Dr. Strange to look at it. Those would be the smart things to do. Instead, Just as Remy's about to leave at the thought of her not trusting in his love, no, it's really more you and your lies and desperation she doesn't trust, Rogue uncorks the vial. Either this won't work and he'll have to believe her, or she's wrong and they can be together at last. She consumes the potion, he pulls her in for a kiss, and we'll get back to that in a bit. We go to Mr. Sinister's hideout, where he's placing the final tithe box in a giant star shape, monologuing internally how horrified he was when he opened the first of his artifacts. But unlike lesser minds, his wasn't crushed by the awareness of how reality was truly shaped. Turns out it's kind of like a rhombus, but with a lot of swirly spikes. No, this revelation only made him stronger to do what he must, in order to finally gain free will. He's about to open his latest acquisition when a kinetically charged card zips past him and explodes, with several more delivered from a familiar figure in the shadows, which explode and create a pile of debris that prevents any escape for the villain. Despite getting what he wanted, the geneticist lied about the cure. It didn't actually work, and destroyed the love of a rogue.
I am shocked. Shocked. Well, not that shocked.
If this review is your only exposure to this comic, it's also the only way you're likely to be surprised by this revelation, thanks to my selective editing. Yeah, see, in the actual comic, when the two lovebirds kissed, it clearly depicts Gambit choking a little and falling over as Rogue cries in shock, meaning this smokescreen with the energy cards and this figure with clearly shorter, white-free hair was both misleading and ineffective. Anyway, Remy is dead, his only remnant now part of Rogue's soul, and her face apparently taking on more of LeBeau's shape. Yikes.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
Sinister says that they, in fact everyone, are just toys at the whim of more powerful forces. He betrayed the two X-Men because they wanted it, but once he opens the box and gains its knowledge, he'll have the power to make his own choices. The traumatized Southern Belle ain't gonna let that happen, deciding to destroy the madman and his totems. She flies him through a wall and maybe drops him, and that seems to do the trick. Sinister under some rubble, saying he's the only one that knows these secrets, and she'll wish they died with him. She doesn't care as long as he actually dies, and he does. It does seem rather easy, doesn't it, given how tenacious Sinister has been, extending his life with science, regenerating, and all that. But I'm okay with it, because his evil machinations made Rogue less hot, so he had it coming. Still, she's curious what the box could contain that was so valuable that Essex would sacrifice his own life. Wanting to know what led to her beloved's death, Rogue opens the coveted box, and on the following splash page, she... Yeah! What the expletive is up with her face? I got this from a scan site, so I wondered if maybe there was some funkiness related to that, like maybe the uploader's scanner goofed and they tried fixing it in Photoshop. But no, I checked my physical copy, and her face does look like that. I can understand if there was an accident the artists and editors didn't catch in time, but still, yeesh. And just when it looked like her face was reverting to her normal, non-Gambit appearance, the comic ends to the discovery that the secret of their reality contained in these boxes are Marvel Comics, including this very issue. Meaning Rogue is going to start breaking the fourth wall ad nauseum, and the only person that'll understand her will be Deadpool. That was What If number 100, a nice premise with a clever ending for its anniversary issue. Fun, if in a dark humor sort of way, but I feel a few simple tweaks could have improved it. That ending probably hits different today, when being meta is so commonplace as to veer into cliché. Sinister not going after the box himself for all the power he's displayed in the past, easily explained by his cryptic admission that he was basically written to enact this complicated plot. It's just one of those villain schemes with some holes in its logic that's all over fiction, even though he probably could have dispatched those worshippers himself. Speaking of, why was Gambit so horrified by them? They weren't drawn all that detailed, so I couldn't tell if they were supposed to be disfigured or what. Living underground, away from the sun, looking allegedly horrendous, savagely worshipping a box full of comic books. If I didn't know any better, I'd think this was a commentary on the readership. Anyway, that same because the writers said so gimmick also works for why Gambit was more dead set on believing in this supposed fix for Rogue's powers, and why they didn't think to get any of their super smart allies to at least analyze the stuff first. Yet the story does an excellent job of otherwise playing it all straight. Gambit doing something terrible in hopes of curing a disease affecting mutants, even if it means working with one of the team's most amoral enemies, maybe a stretch, but I think plausible, with that whole drive for redemption, then further tempted by the chance of getting close to the love of his life. Yeah, these alternate universe stories are all about different outcomes, often because the characters make different decisions. Even if you could argue he would never normally trust Sinister on this, you could still understand that in a moment of weakness, he just might. And even so, he goes out of his way to not hurt those underdwellers, and as much of a tool it makes him to leave Rogue holding that boulder that could have easily caused more damage, it does kind of show his faith that she'll be okay. Though we could also understand if she burst from the sewers and then launched him into orbit. While he may love her, it doesn't excuse his selfishness of taking these risks simply because he doesn't think he can go without physical intimacy. But back to that fateful smooch. They really killed the suspense there. I think the story would have been better served if instead of showing him falling over, they break the kiss and Rogue seems to weakly mutter his name, then jump to Sinister's lair. It would create more believable misdirect that the cure was actually poison, and it still works with that evil for story's sake angle, in case any reader might wonder why he'd go that far. Then maybe do more to cover Rogue's head so it looks less like Gambit, or maybe not show a figure at all, just the cards until she confronts him face to face. Not only was your potion a fake, it tasted like a mango! I hate mango! Is it weird that I've reviewed 2 What If comics and both ended with Rogue permanently absorbing the powers and physical traits of a guy in her life? Not much else I can really say that was really bad about the comic. Sinister's dialogue is filled with nicely subtle references to the big reveal, restrained enough to not give too much away, but excellently fitting after absorbing the final page. The art in my copy is much better than these scans, with much smoother colors. I'm assuming these were the best the uploader could manage, so I don't want to seem as if I'm criticizing them. There were some choices and some expressions that may have seemed odd for the moment, but overall, nothing that seemed too different from other comics at the time. And again, really didn't care for our heroine becoming Mrs. Manface. No! I did notice an oddity with the inner monologues. With Gambit, his thoughts read the same as the spoken dialogue. Rogue, however, speaks with her usual southern drawl, but thinks more proper sentences, few if any contractions, no using ah instead of I. Just seemed kind of unusual to me. This was an interesting, if perhaps slightly twisted tale of how far 2 people will go to be together when circumstances have kept them apart, keeping in the spirit of the what-if premise of balancing the believable and the outlandish, with a tongue-in-cheek conclusion I doubt anyone would have seen coming. I'm the Angry Spork, and man have I got issues.